The way I would phrase it now would be, I was looking for more and more direct experience, and it wasn't being offered in most church settings. Go to church on Sunday, that's what you did. Be involved in a committee. And once again, nothing wrong with any of that. I needed something more. And so that's how I started going to monasteries, and then that led me into going out to Canada and then New Mexico. And it was that experience that really opened me to just a larger God vision of God.
When life throws a challenge at you, one thing is certain: to find a resolution for every issue, every problem, for everybody, there's more than one way. So today we're trying something a little bit different, in part because of what we're talking about. Today we're talking about direct encounters or spiritual experiences that are sometimes hard to share. And you may not realize, or you may realize, that there are often more people in the room with us when we're recording than just the people that are on the mic or behind the camera on the video. And so we felt like it'd be helpful to have those people available to share and join in the discussion as well. So if you hear others in the discussion today, we have Christibeth Paul, Nathan Tipton, and Shay Boswell with us. They're part of our podcast team and here when we record episodes, and felt like this would be a great time to kind of broaden the discussion a little bit, given that it's something that's not always easy to talk about, but it's a great thing to be able to do in a group. So just wanted to give you a heads up that maybe a little different format this time than what we've done in the past.
Yes, and we really appreciate their participation because it helps us to get across that lots of people have experiences that sometimes are difficult to talk about or explain.
Yeah.
And it's not, they're not limited to special people. It's all people. So what about you guys? What did you think of anything? Any experience?
So I was living in Northern California, and I was in my early 20s, and my grandmother used to send me a lot of letters, and I wasn't great at responding. I did, but not as often, and hers were so sweet and long and would tell lots of stories and her feelings about things, and so mine were more brief and not as frequent. So I felt guilt a little bit about that. And sadly, she died while I was out there. Not that, she was in her early 60s, so she died too young. And I was flying home to her funeral. And I was sitting in a window seat, and there was no one in the middle. And then to the left was a gentleman that we started chatting. It's a long flight. We chatted most of the flight. And I wouldn't say it was a super deep conversation, but it was enjoyable, and there was some depth. It was moderately deep. And towards the end of the flight, it was time to put your belt on and kind of pack up. And I was doing that and not looking at him. And then he started to say something, and I looked over, and I didn't just see him, I saw my grandmother there. And it was very confusing to my eyes, but there was no doubt that she was sitting there, or at least that's what I saw. And I heard his voice, but it was like her talking. And he started talking about God. I can't remember exactly what he said, but said, "You are loved, and you're okay." And the guilt that I had about my grandmother seemed to just float away at that time. Might have said I understand or something like that. But it was really moving and shifted me in that moment. And then the plane landed, and then it was really time to pack up and go. And so I'm looking down again, and I didn't notice. It seemed like the door hadn't opened to the plane yet, because I couldn't tell on my peripheral if the people had moved down the aisle. But I look up because I'm going to say bye to him, and he was gone, completely gone. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to hurry. So I shuffled out because I really felt connected at that point. I get out of the plane and I go to the gate, and I couldn't see him anywhere. It was just gone. And that made it more, felt like my grandmother, or made it more supernatural feeling, I guess,
yeah.
that just all of a sudden was gone. So then we had the funeral and the family things, and I flew back to California, and I felt like my grandmother was there in multiple different small scenes. One was that I was lost at night in the dark, like driving home from something, and I just felt like this was before Google Maps or cell phones, and I felt like she got me there. And there was another incident in the kitchen at my house where I felt like something could have caught fire, but it didn't, and there was just other little moments where I just felt like she was there with me, unlike I'd ever felt before. And then about 6 weeks, some period of time later, it was a long time ago, I can't remember exactly how long, but I was driving from California back to Tennessee with my friend who was driving in the driver's seat in my vehicle. And I was sound asleep in the passenger seat, and we were in the middle of, I can't, either Arizona or Utah, somewhere that was big open road, highway, and I came up out of a sound sleep and said, we need to stop at the next exit. Why? What's the problem? I got plenty of gas, I'm fine. No, we need to stop at the next exit. Just trust me, we need to stop. I'm feeling Nana's telling me we need to stop. And so we get off. I can't remember how long it took to get there, but we got off on the exit, pulled over. It was a Jeep Cherokee, so it was easy for me to look under the car. And I looked under, and the entire, I don't know how much oil is in a Jeep Cherokee, but there was a lot of oil that was pouring out of the bottom of the engine and was on the concrete, and it was just a puddle, and it was all dripping. I said, well, I guess we need to get the car fixed. And so it was like a repair person that was very nearby, and we were able to handle it. And then I felt like my grandmother just left. I remember commenting to my friend that, wow, I'm so glad she got us here. And then it felt like she left, and I haven't felt that presence since then.
That's similar to a lot of times, the church like says we're in Easter now, and there's the great 50 days of Easter. And the reason for that is a similar thing, is that the people who initially experienced the risen Christ, it was like that. There was an intensity to it for a period of time, and then it eased until the Spirit returned. Right? So a lot of times people tell stories like that, powerful stories of presence and connection. And that's what happens. There's an intense period, and then not as much. But you live with that experience of having the presence for a certain amount of time. And did it have an impact on you? Did it have an impact on your life?
Huge. But it took a while for me to process what the impact was. But I enjoyed telling the story.
Well, thank you so much for telling it.
I mean, I enjoyed telling it back then, and I enjoy telling it now. But then it was just so exciting, and so I just needed to talk about it. So you're asking about
the impact. Yeah. But it was like the initial impact, and then as time went on, you had more time to almost like integrate it, or so to speak.
That's a good word for it. Yeah, I think that I was at an age where I was really doubting. I'd been raised Catholic and didn't quite feel it at that time. And so I think that really did shift my belief of thinking that there was something bigger than myself, and that my grandmother was a big part of it.
Oh, wow. Gosh. Powerful experience.
Yeah.
Okay, so one experience that I've had where, I just felt this like really powerful presence or pull, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. My family and I, we were in Asheville, North Carolina for my mom's funeral, and we had picked up my grandmother from Knoxville, taken her to Asheville, and after the funeral we were driving her back to Knoxville. And as we were driving back to Knoxville, we pulled over about halfway to stop at a gas station, just a little rest break, go to the bathroom, whatnot. And so I go to the bathroom, and I'm really embarrassed to say this, but, you know, just my mind was all over the place, so at least I had a little bit of an excuse. But I went to the bathroom, and then I walked out without washing my hands. And I was like, I got out of the door, and I was like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? Like, you have got to go back in there and wash your hands. But it was almost like something was legitimately pulling me back into the bathroom. Like, it was so powerful. It was like, go back into the bathroom and wash your hands, which sounds so silly. But I walked back into the bathroom, and I washed my hands, and I go over to the paper towel holder, whatever you call it, and I swipe my hand under it, and I'm drying my hands, and I see this little folded up piece of paper sitting on top of the paper towel holder. I don't know what, dispenser. What's the word? And I don't know, you know, I mean, it's this little, not very nice gas station, but for some reason I decided to pick up this little folded up piece of paper. And again, normally something I wouldn't do. And I opened the piece of paper, and it was the Bible verse, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks, because I've just lost my mom. I have no idea what the future is going to look like for me. I'm graduating college in a month, and I don't know where I'm going from here. And here's this little folded up piece of paper on the way back from my mom's funeral that says that. And it's just like, bam, like this huge, powerful experience that I had. So, yeah.
Gosh, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing.
Wow.
It would be almost a desecration to try to interpret it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Only you get to do that.
Yeah.
And we can hold that, but only you get to do that.
Well, and I think that can be our temptation, you know, is just, and I think I may have said this earlier too, but one of my first instincts is to explain, you know, or to try to dissect or try to whatever, you know, versus like you had suggested, the power in just sitting with it, reflecting on it, giving it time, letting it breathe, really taking the moment to just pay attention and just learn, maybe not even in the moment, but over time, what that experience was for you.
Yeah. Yeah, and in my experience with that is the bigger the experience, the longer the processing. I mean, it can take my whole life, some of them.
In the immediate, like, aftermath of it, I was, like, shaking.
Oh, wow.
Because to me it was so crazy. Like, and I think I said this the other day that, you know, a lot of people may write it off as like a coincidence, but to me it was just way too big of a thing to be a coincidence. Like, yeah, someone left that folded up. They may have had that intention too. Like, they may have, in my mind, there was a person that was going around setting these little notes around, probably all over the place. But they had no idea whose hands they were going to end up in. And for me to get the one that said, for I know the plans I have for you, after, and granted, me losing my mom, that was the first person in my life I've ever lost that was close to me. And again, I was graduating college, not sure where I was going from there. And so, yeah, in the immediate aftermath of it, I was just like, oh my gosh. And even now, like, when I think back to it, it hits me really hard. Like, if there's ever a time that I'm like doubting if I'm doubting my faith or any kind of higher power or energy, and I remember that story, if I just think about it, I'm like, no, like, that's something. So, yeah.
That's a gift.
Yeah.
To have that.
Yeah. And even now, too, like, there will be times when I get, like, kind of negative about something happening in the world, and my grandmother will be like, remember when we stopped at that gas station and you got that folded up piece of note or paper, and I'm like, thank you, I needed that.
Wow.
So it's been, and that was almost 10 years ago now, but it's still, yeah.
While the experiences vary, how you take it tends to be different. I mean, not different like there's one right way, one wrong way. I'm completely interested in what that meant for your life, and the big things tend to, even the small things, or kind of, none of them are small, but maybe less intense as that, still affect the person. By and large, they have an impact on the person in some way. And one of the books that I read along these lines, and I've read it a number of times, it's called Psyche and the Sacred, by this guy named Lionel Corbett. And he talks, he's actually quoting this guy named Rudolph Otto way back in the day, way back in the day, I can't even remember when, but 20th century, maybe even the beginning of the 20th century. He really got into kind of trying to take a look at religious experiences, him and this guy named William James. And one of the things that he said about the religious experiences is, in a sense, that's kind of where all religions are based from. That religion, in a sense, kind of comes out of those experiences, and then somehow or another they just catch on, or they don't. And so that would be, that kind of an experience would be in the field of how a religion would start. Yeah, like him, like Christianity, the main direct experiences that come out of, especially what we call the New Testament, come from some type of gathering that ends up in a meal. And there's two different kinds. There's bread and wine, and then there's bread and fish. But fish would be really messy in a institutional setting. So the fish kind of faded away.
That's funny.
So the bread and wine meal stuck. And the danger is when it becomes this is the only way. So unfortunately, what a lot of churches did, Catholic Church, Episcopal Church, is say there's just 7 sacraments, and those are the ways that you can have these experiences. And then the Protestants came along and said, don't forget the Bible. and so those were the authorized ways.
Yeah.
And everything else was very suspect, unless they could be measured against, this is in my seminary, they really basically could care less what your direct experience was if you didn't have an authority to back it up. And I think that's missing the mark by a million miles.
Yeah.
But that's the way most of these things are organized.
Yeah.
There's authorities, and these authorities, we're doing it right now with the Pope.
Yep.
Right? The Pope could say whether or not that counted.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, for you personally, you could say, no, it did for me.
Yeah.
But I have a million stories of people. Don't mess with that. Well, that's just your imagination.
Yeah.
Or that's or any of that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah.
And I would say no. We could start a whole religion right around that.
Yeah.
Because for me, it really is the experience and then the reflection on it.
Yeah.
That's the movement. the experience. So you have the experience, and if it's strong enough, then it's like, what was that? And so then there's that reflection on it. If it's not strong enough, then it becomes some of what we're, wow, what a coincidence, or, that was strange. Wow, I didn't get enough sleep last night, or whatever. God, the brain's weird. So in scripture, you got everything from the still small voice of Elijah,
right,
to Ezekiel's freaky thing, where there's this cherubim and seraphim and the four. I can't even remember it all, but it's just a freak show.
Yeah.
I mean that in a good way. I mean a good freak show, a freak show I'd pay money for. But it's images that are not images that most people would use, would have now. As I looked, a stormy wind came out of the north, a great cloud with brightness around it and fire flashing forth continually. And in the middle of the fire, something like gleaming amber. Okay, so there's the beginning. In the middle of it was something like 4 living creatures. This was their appearance. They were of human form. Each had 4 faces, and each of them had 4 wings. Their legs were straight, and the soles of their feet were like the sole of a calf's foot, and they sparkled like burnished bronze. Under their wings and on their 4 sides they had human hands, and the 4 had their faces and their wings thus. Their wings touched one another, and each of them moved straight ahead without turning as they moved. As for the appearance of their faces, the 4 had the face of a human being, the face of a lion on the right side, the face of an ox on the left side, and the face of an eagle. Such were their faces. Their wings were spread out above. Each creature had 2 wings, each of which touched the wing of another, while 2 covered their bodies. Each moved straight ahead. Wherever the spirit would go, they went, without turning as they went. Like I'm lost. Like I'm trying to get this image of what that is.
There's so much going on.
Right.
At the time.
And all that's going on. What I'm saying is somebody had it.
Yeah.
Right? Somebody had an experience. And it goes on. I'm tired of reading it. So, but it's like.
Right. And that's
the
vivid description of
this massive vision. And then the vision then influences him to then go out and do what he did as a prophet. Mm-hmm. That's why the second piece is just, to me, it's just as important as the experience. And that's why I think it's great when we can support one another in it, rather than just dismiss it right off.
Well, and I think it's easier if your focus is on what that meant to you or what happened after that. That makes more sense to me than trying to make sense of the experience. If it's something that's really unusual or I haven't experienced, or I would say, I don't know about that. Very different if I'm thinking about, okay, so what did that mean for you? I think that's an easier place to grab onto and support each other from, just affirming what you're saying.
But what do you mean I don't know about that?
And I think thinking about like my own experiences, like I don't think of myself as a very skeptical person. I'm somebody that's always kind of liked to believe and wanted to believe real readily. But with some of my own situations, I can brush them off pretty quick.
Oh, really? That's
so
a shame.
There's a story, I think I'd shared this with you, Shay, and it was after your story, CB, from the gas station that I'd forgotten about it, and it just came back to me because I was feeling like, gosh, I wish I had more encounters like that I could remember. I feel like some I've had, but I don't remember them.
That's so amazing. Okay, go ahead.
Sorry. So I was at college, and I'd just gotten there, and I didn't want to be there. I wasn't ready to go. I didn't know what I wanted to study. I had to pick a major, and I was there maybe a week or 2 before classes had started, and hadn't really met anybody. And I was just like, I want to go home. I don't want to do this. I'm not feeling this at all. And I kept feeling that right up to the morning before I was supposed to go to my first class, and just felt totally unsettled, and just was like, I'm just going to go to this class, but I'm going to tell my parents I'm coming home. This just isn't what I want to do. And so I'm putting it off to the point that I'm almost going to be late, getting there. And so I'm walking over to where my class is, and the door going into the building had like a big stone thing above the door. And carved in that in stone was the word Whitney above the door.
Wow.
And I was just like, what are the chances of that? Is that? But I felt a peace with the idea of, no, you're okay. Just go through the door.
Oh, my goodness.
But I had forgotten about that and kind of blew it off to the point that when I remembered it, I questioned whether it really happened or if it was something that I'd dreamed or made up. And so I got on the internet and searched Google Maps to see if I could find that building, to see if I could see it on that building, because I didn't believe it.
Like, did it happen?
Yeah. I had convinced myself that I'd made it up or that it didn't happen. So every angle that I looked, I could see everything but that door. I could see every door, and there were words above every door.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, maybe it wasn't that door. Maybe it was this one. Maybe it was that one. I could never find it.
Oh, my gosh.
So I searched for hours on the internet about the history of this building and what those names were and why they were there, and I found it. And
you found Whitney?
It does say Whitney above that door. And there's a reason why those names were there and that kind of thing. They were people that were involved in the textile industry, because that's what that building used to be. So it was for Eli Whitney, and there was a reason behind it,
Yeah.
But it was interesting to me just that it was something I'd forgotten about, something that I'd been like, okay, that didn't really even happen. And then in trying to go back and find it, it was hard to find,
Yeah.
But it was just interesting.
That's amazing. That's so thank you for
it's
that.
not that big. I don't feel that has the significance that your story does, because it was such a small little thing.
Well, one thing to me would be, and take this for what it's worth, I wouldn't compare.
Yeah.
I mean, so that was your experience. That was it.
Yeah.
And once again, the impact that it had, to me, is the big thing. Right? So if I walked in and had Whitney through it, I'd be like, Whitney.
Yeah.
Yeah. But for it to have what it had for you, yeah, that's a sacred experience. It's a holy experience. To me, that's man. And thank God.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you stayed.
Yeah.
And what a gift that is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so for me, I get it. I mean, it's like it's easy to discount stuff like that, or say once again, oh, well, that's just here because of Eli Whitney, or
right. Right.
But that doesn't take away from the experience you had.
Yeah. And I could have entered any door in that building. It didn't have to be that one.
Yeah.
I mean, they're.
Yeah, and I think that once again, I think these experiences happen quite regularly, and some might be like Ezekiel's thing that we read some of. Just bizarre, what seems to me anyway, very, very bizarre and hard for my mind to enter into that world. I still can't even picture what it was that thing was supposed to look like.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's a little closer to what's kind of my normal consciousness, so I can enter into it pretty easily.
Yeah.
But they're all powerful and important. Because in the subjective sense of that. So they're powerful and important to the person having the experience.
Yeah.
What it does for somebody else is,
yeah.
And in a sense, that's beside the point from my perception. It's trusting that, and sometimes for me, it's the reflection side takes longer than other times.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're doing your research. It took that.
Yeah.
For you to say, okay, this is what it's meant to me.
Mm-hmm.
And be okay with that. And that's, I love the whole idea of having the experience, reflecting on the experience, and then seeing what that does to you.
Yeah.
And that reflection could be an hour, or it could be 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, I could share a story if you want.
Yeah.
Just trying to think of how weird I want to be with you.
Be weird.
Here's the deepest one for me in a lot of ways. So I went out to this retreat in New Mexico, and one night we did a sweat lodge, and I'd fasted all day. That's just something I like to do before I do a sweat lodge, because it just felt right. And so I'd fasted and hadn't had much I drank some water, but not much. And so I was really in a pretty cleansed state, I guess you could say, from a physical standpoint. And we'd been on the retreat for a couple days already, and so I had this very, very intense sweat, very, very intense, and came out of it, and the guy who was leading the sweat said, okay, if you want, everybody just kind of go lay on the ground. And most people laid on the ground and looked up and kind of went out into the cosmos, as it were. But something in me just kept saying, no, face down, face down. So I put my face down into the ground and had this massive vision. So just explodes, right? So this vision explodes. And it's a woman, like an indigenous woman, on not a throne like a European throne, but like a wooden throne-ish kind of thing, chair, throne. And there's flowers and vines and all kind of greenery, all growing all around the throne and all around her. And she's sitting there, and man, she's just like intense and beautiful and powerful and all that. And so I was like right before her, and I was just on my knees before her, and she's just like looking at me. And then on her side, in addition to all that, there was a jaguar, like a Black Panther-y jaguar, and a wolf and a deer and like a hawk-ish type bird. They're and they're kind of like all around her, and deep, as if kind of like she's kind of like the queen king spirit of nature. And I just kind of was in her presence, and it was just unbelievable. And then it was gone. Okay, and so what do you make of that, right? So I went there, and a lot of me going there was that image, the Christian image of God, was really, really losing its meaning for me. Too masculine. Too book-oriented and rules-oriented in many ways. Too limited by the structure of the church. So for me to have an experience, a divine experience of her, was life-changing. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so interested in finding other languages to try to talk, words to use for what we call God, and very, very uncomfortable with just the masculine language. And that's all because of her. And as time has gone on, I just experienced her in other ways, and it's just kind of opened me up and deepened me into a different God image, and one much more connected to nature and manifested and revealed through nature. So there's that.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in the way I would phrase it now would be, I was looking for more and more direct experience, and it wasn't being offered within most official, in most church settings.
Yeah.
Okay. Go to church on Sunday. That's what you did.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And be involved in a committee. Do an altar guild thing. All that stuff. And once again, nothing wrong with any of that, but it's not, I needed something more.
Yeah.
And so that's how I started going to monasteries, and then that led me into going out to Canada and then New Mexico. And it was, once again, that experience that I was just telling you about,
mm-hmm.
that really opened me to just a larger God vision of God,
mm-hmm.
vision of. And then I'm still unpacking that and what that means, and that's why the kind of Carl Jung and his world really kind of gives me language to try to get into that.
With that encounter, did you feel comfort or fear or
all that?
All of it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Comfort in the sense of, oh yeah, this makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense for me that the divine nature isn't just masculine.
Right.
And whatever that means, the divine nature. But
mm-hmm.
what I mean by that is that the life force energy isn't one gender.
Isn't confined to that. Yeah.
And so I needed a heavy duty dose of the feminine world, as symbolized by her.
Mm-hmm.
But she was a strong feminine. And is most directly, in my experience, revealed, manifested in nature.
Yeah.
In the world. And my experience of the Christian God was that the Christian God is separate from nature and the world. And that's not true across the board. Wasn't true for like St. Francis and
right.
Some of the other people in that. But kind of mainstream, yeah. God is the totally other than nature. And that's not my experience.
Yeah.
And that one was really the big one.
Wow.
Yeah. So then I got to walk around with that, right? So walk around with that, and on the cool side, it's a deep sense of the immediate presence of a greater intelligence than the human.
Mm-hmm.
And that's once again experience it mostly through nature. The negative side would be always looking for that big.
Yeah.
And it can't happen all the time. It's just not possible.
Yeah.
So the other one, it was prior to this. So let's see, I was probably in my early 40s, maybe. And I guess what I was immediately trying to find was someone who's going to help me with my own experience. And so I'd done a variety of things, started going to monasteries, and then came here. So it got to the point where I was just up to my eyes in work, and I needed a break, and went to that monastery that Thomas Merton was a part of in Kentucky. And I got there, and something messed up with my reservations, and I ended up kind of in this what used to be a dormitory. And I was like, I had like a whole floor of a dorm to myself, and it was pouring down rain. It was dark, and I was struggling hard. I suppose the central struggle was, what does it mean to be a priest? What is a priest?
Mm-hmm.
Not a parish administrator, not a church worker. Nothing wrong with those things. Those things are great in and of themselves. But I was really captured by what is a priest.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had the lights off. I was meditating, and I had a candle lit. And God, I was just, I can't emphasize how much pain I was in.
Mm.
I mean, it was just excruciating. It's like, God, what have I done? And now I've got a wife and 3 kids, and what am I going to do? And all of a sudden, the light from the candle just almost was like it exploded. And the whole room was lit up, but my eyes were closed.
Mm.
And so all I could feel and sense was light. It's just giant light everywhere. And I was just like, just kind of bathing in it. And and then this one felt pure, is intense comfort a thing?
Mm.
It was a thing for me. It was intense
Yeah.
comfort. It was like intensity, but it felt good. Very, very comfortable. And I don't know how long I was in that. And then all of a sudden I just heard this voice that said, "You are mine." And then I spent years and years and years processing what that means, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or what that means to me.
Mm.
Because at first it was like, God, man, I'm special. I'm this special guy. and that didn't feel right.
Yeah.
And life helped me with that one. And then as time went on, I felt like more like it was, yes, I'm a part of something bigger than my own ego.
Mm-hmm.
I'm connected to something larger than me. And I've always thought, I carry that with me all the time now, because I had that experience.
Yeah.
Now, the name you would give to all that, I don't know.
Right.
And it certainly doesn't fit into the Nicene Creed for me.
Right.
Because I think creeds are fine, but they are a way to try to express somebody's or a group of what somebody can agree upon the experience was or is in this mystery that we call life in God.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't have to measure my experience against the creed.
Mm-hmm.
I used to think I had to,
Mm.
but I don't.
Yeah.
Your experience is your experience, and if it fits the creed, fantastic. If it doesn't, then you're left with that. What do you do with that?
Yeah.
So yeah. And periodically I'll still, that was 20 years ago probably. 20, and I'll still go back to it and think, process it some more. And
Yeah.
I think the processing for me, the reflecting and processing is a big deal. So like if you take Paul's experience on the road to Damascus, the big light and Jesus saying, "Paul, why are you persecuting me?" And see, if you look at the Acts story, it looks like he's over it in 3 days.
Yeah.
Right?
Interesting.
But if you go to Galatians, where he writes more about the experience just in a different way, it's 3 years. So after the experience, or however that experience happened, he went to Arabia, it says in Galatians, and then he went back to Damascus, and then he went to Jerusalem to meet the leadership of the Christian movement.
Okay.
So 3 years of processing what the heck just happened, and that makes more sense to me.
Yeah. Interesting.
The bigger the experience, the more most people don't change their minds in a 180 fashion the way he did in 3 days.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen usually. And once again, just coming back to my life, processing and reflecting are a part of the deal.
Yeah. And have you found that individually or with others, or
What's that?
the processing part?
I mean, I usually have had somebody to help me with it, but individually too, both.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you have to be really careful about who you find, as we kind of sort of talked about before. Some people will try to talk you out of the experience,
Right.
or minimize it, or once again, put it in a language that makes them feel comfortable. And the people that have been the most helpful to me have let the experience be and have asked questions, and we can move with it.
Yeah.
So I have a question for y'all. What about when you feel like you have an experience or you see a sign or something along those lines, and it's really, really strong. It's a really strong feeling, and you feel like this thing that you're experiencing is telling you to do something, or this sign is, telling you that something is right, and then it doesn't pan out the way that you thought it would. I feel like people may have experienced that as well. So like, for example, for me, I remember one time I was in college and I just had this really, really, really strong feeling, and it was like somebody was speaking to me and saying, like, you need to call your family and check on them. You need to call your family and check on them. And so I called every single person in my family, and gratefully or thankfully so, like, nothing was wrong. But it was like, okay, well, now I don't know if I trust this, like, these feelings that I get. So I guess, how do you work through those and trusting those experiences and feelings that you have?
Yeah, so part of it is not trusting it because it didn't turn out the way you'd hoped, or that you thought it would.
Yeah, yeah, in some cases. Like, again, with my family thing, I'm glad that, like, nothing was wrong.
Right.
But then now, anytime I get that, like, strong sense of you need to do this, or, whatever it is, I'm like, I don't know. Do I trust this? Is this just me being crazy inside my head, or is this actually I don't know.
Yeah. And in the end, like all of this stuff, only you're going to be able to decide that. So you'll decide whether, should I follow that? Should I not follow that? I've had different outcomes, and I think somebody said the last time we were talking about this, one of the big things is really, really learning how to just pay attention to that more and more and more. And what's going to happen with that, that's a whole nother thing. Right? So it's like the story I told about the young woman who had the overwhelming urge to you need to text this particular friend of hers. And she was driving her kids to school, and then she ends up pulling over into the parking lot of a high school and texting it. Now, she didn't know what was gonna come of that. But the big thing was just following it. That's the first thing, I think. And then to me, all right. And then the second thing, because paying attention to that, let me go back to the first thing. Paying attention to that is the first and foremost thing. If you don't pay attention, then who knows nothing is going to happen.
Right.
Okay. So sometimes, like in your instance, when you were at the gas station and it said that feeling was go back into the bathroom, and you had this powerful scripture reference, right? So, and she's shaking her head yes. So just so we're using this. So that powerful, that was like, oh yes, I can trust this. And then you have this other one where, well, nothing really seems to have come of it. So maybe I can't trust it. That's what I mean by, in the end, you're going to have to be the one to decide. But the first thing is just paying attention to it, and then going with the energy that you feel like you need to go with. Okay. If that's not enough, then I'm going to throw this whole other thing in, and this is a whole nother bag of stuff. And the bag of stuff is, When is it an external to be taken as an external thing, and when is it to be turned internally? Right? So in your instance, call and check on your family. Right? And you do the external and nothing comes from it. From my perspective, well, I would then turn it internally. Because we all carry our families inside of us as well as outside of us. And Scripture and other spiritual traditions talk about this a lot. Jesus talked about it, and I think we've brought it up here before, that one of the things about your family, he says, is if you're going to follow me, you're going to have to hate your mother and your father and your brother and your sister, right? Now, how are you going to go about interpreting that? Some groups of people interpret that, especially cults, to, yes, you literally have to hate your literal mother, father, sister, brother, and then that separates them out from their family, and usually bad things happen. Mm-hmm. So for me, that's out. You have to decide for you. For me, that's out. What other parts of our tradition have said is, no, what they're talking about is that internal part of you that how you experience your mother and your father and your sister and your brother inside, and what they represent to you inside of you. Okay, for instance, here's what I mean. And I'm going to take this into my family tree. Okay, so my grandparents lived through the Depression, and then were adults after that, after the New Deal and all that kind of stuff. And so whenever a political thing would come around, my grandmother would always be like, you have to vote Democrat. Republicans are from the devil.
Wow.
Yeah, it was that strong. That was her mindset. And her mindset came from, they didn't help us any. It was the Democrats that helped us when we needed it. And my grandparents were blue-collar people, and that's how they, especially her, experienced life. That got passed on to my dad. Mm-hmm. Okay, and he was a Democrat. Now, he wasn't quite as stringent as that. Mm-hmm. So what I would say is that he moved a little bit further away from where his grandmother was on that. Mm-hmm. So somehow or another, he was able to say, I'm not going to just be the way she is, but I will think about it the way that I think about it and come to the conclusions that I come to. Mm-hmm. Right? And then it comes to me. I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. I'm an independent. Mm-hmm. And that comes straight out of that line. See, so on some level, my grandmother and the way that she was, at least in the political realm, died to me. Because I could move away from it and become a person who thinks for himself. And I think Jesus, that's the way I'm going to take to what Jesus was saying. In order for you to follow me, you have to be the one who makes the choice. Mm-hmm. You have to be the person, and you're going to have to grow into the person who God would have you be. We'll just use the religious language. You're going to... And that's what it is to be a full human, a full you. If I just say, well, my grandmother says, and live from that place, or not even consciously realize that, but just act the way she acted because that's how I... Get me? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's the thing about this. You have these signs, and maybe sometimes those signs are pointing to take a look at what's going on inside of you, not necessarily outside of you. Mm-hmm. But the sign is still there. Yeah. The energy is still there. That's why the paying attention is the first thing, and that's why that's where I come down on it. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. It does, yeah.
And it happens all the time. It's going on all the time. That's the thing. I think that's why the scripture's saying mother, father, sister, Mm-hmm. And you can take that externally or you can take that internally or some level of both.
It reminds me, there's a quote, I think it may be T.S. Eliot, but the quote says, it doesn't matter how tall your grandfather was, you have to do your own growing.
Yes, right, yes.
With the idea that it's you.
It is.
That yes, those affect things, but...
And that's the whole, I think that's the reason we're trying to talk about this whole experience thing, is for you to take yourself seriously. You are important. that you can encounter the presence of God, the Spirit, however you want to put it, just as much as the Pope or anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
All right, it's trusting yourself.
And I think that's the challenge. It's some of those experiences that we've shared or that have happened to us that we haven't shared are so intense and personal, they're hard to even share. Or like you said, Christibeth, with the idea that you're in your head, you're thinking, okay, am I crazy? Did that really, was that really what was going on? And that's where I think, having the ability to talk about it together is so helpful, but it's pretty rare. I mean, it's vulnerable to share an experience like that you've had. I mean, it's really putting yourself out there.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's sacred ground. It's holy ground.
That's a good way to describe it.
And there's no doubt about it. And anybody who's willing to share it, I have nothing but the utmost respect for. That's why we need to embrace people, not criticize, judge, reduce the experience, but really hold it for the person. That's the way we can love each other, I think. It's huge. Thank you for listening to this episode of the More Than One Way podcast, brought to you by the Center for Spiritual Practice in Knoxville, Tennessee. We really appreciate your time and would love to hear your feedback. You can reach us by emailing hello@morethanonewaypod.com, or you can connect with us on social media using the handle @morethanonewaypod. If you found this episode helpful, we hope that you'll share it with your friends, with your family, with people you work with all the people who you know. Thank you and take care.